In my last video, I discussed which countries are allowing American citizens to visit during the COVID-19 pandemic. It is July 7th, 2020, and I want to discuss more in detail a few of the closest and easiest to get to for American citizens. So follow along. Okay, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever it is you're located. We're going to jump right in. These are a few of the closest and easiest countries for Americans to get to and visit, or should I say even vacation, during the pandemic. It is July 7th, 2020, and we're going to jump right in. So first up, the Bahamas. Check it out. Okay, again, first up, the Bahamas. I was just there a few months ago, or earlier this year. Nice visit, but let's step through. Now, I went through each country last time as far as a little bit of the details for each one, but this one I'm actually going to click on this little link for each one, and it shows the details for each one. So some of the requirements: do you need a test, don't you need a test, do you need it 72 hours before, blah blah blah, and details, and exactly what's going to be open. So this was updated at least 2 weeks ago. Each one of these looks like this whole story was updated 3 hours ago, so they're updating this same one constantly. So again, it's traveloffpath.com. So take a look at it on your own time, but I wanted to run through a few for my viewers. Okay, so the Bahamas is officially reopening to tourism on the July 1st, which that means it's already open. They'll be accepting tourists from all countries as long as they follow the pre-entry protocol, and that's below. So the islands of the Bahamas are reopening its borders and welcoming international tourists back to its shores on the 1st. Okay, as long as travelers do not have been exposed to the virus nor showing any symptoms, they will be granted entry without a quarantine process. And this is actually where I stayed at too. Okay, so the Bahamas is currently in phase 1 of the reopening plan, which started on June 15th, but it allows private yachts, it only allowed private yachts and private aviation to enter back then during phase 1, which runs until the 1st. So now we're into phase 2. July 1st will mark phase 2 of the reopening, which has less restrictions and will provide travelers with more things to do inside the country. So let's jog down. Our top priority is always the commitment to the health and well-being of the residents, of course. So as the head of the Bahamas Ministry and Tourism, it's a nice shot of there. I guess no cruise ships are sitting there right now though, unless they were registered in the Bahamas, which some were. So what are the rules for visiting the Bahamas as of July 1st? This was updated on the 24th of June now. So from the original data published, the Bahamian government has changed its no test needed rule and will now require inbound travelers bring a negative PCR test. So here's the info. Due to the recent increase of COVID-19 cases in the U.S. So this is what I tell you, reread this story, pull this up again, traveloffpath.com, go to the country that you're thinking about going, and then click on the link that shows the details as this one does. So because of obviously we're not doing too well here in the US, and some are actually picking and choosing which states you come from too. So this just states that due to the recent increase of COVID-19 cases in the US and in the abundance of caution for health and safety for both travelers and residents, all incoming visitors must present a COVID-19 RT-PCR negative swab test upon arrival. Results may be no more than 10 days old, which you know what, I still don't get that. You know, what happens in 10 days unless you self-quarantine yourself? This is kind of a moot point. So they're pretty much just saying, just come. They'll deal with you when you get there. So select individuals will be exempt from testing, which includes children under the age of 2, private pilots who do not deplane, and citizens of the country. Now, before you go, in order to be granted entry into the Bahamas, the government is asking travelers to fill out an online electronic health declaration form. It's asked questions about travelers' departure country and if they've been in contact with the virus and if they have any symptoms. So we know what the answers of that going to be, regardless of, you know, if you thought you've been around somebody and you're on vacation, you're probably still going to say no. And that's sad. Just don't even take a chance, people. Don't take a chance. So you can find the link of the form here. So remember, it's traveloffpath.com. I like this site. In addition to the form now, travelers must bring a negative PCR test no older than 10 days. Okay, we got that. Upon arrival, you'll be at the airport. You'll undergo temperature screenings, which we are still not doing that here. Do you know that the United States government is fighting it? I mean, well, let's say the executive branch, how about that? And the Republicans are fighting taking tests at the airports. They do not want TSA to handle that. And go look on that. Just go research that one on your own. I found that interesting last week. Travelers should then expect for the Bahamas Healthy Traveler campaign that encourages both visitors and residents to continue practicing social distancing measures, regularly washing hands and using sanitizers and face masks, of course. A little image of what you need to do. Have flights resumed in the Bahamas? Yes. So let's see, as of July 1st, let's see, from Canada, Montreal, and Toronto. No, these don't matter for us, but as of July 3rd, they started flying from Montreal and Toronto. From the USA, New York City on JetBlue, starting on the 3rd, and United on the 6th. And I'm reading these for those who aren't really looking at the screen. Maybe you're in the car. So if you're wondering why I'm reading over what you can actually read yourself, this is why. Charlotte is begun on the 7th on American. Atlanta on Delta starting on the 2nd, and these are all of July. Houston and United starting on July 6th. Orlando and to the Bahamas, on Bahamas Air starting on July 2nd. Miami on Bahamas Air starting on July 2nd. Fort Lauderdale on Bahamas Air starting on July 2nd. And flights are also showing between Bahamas and Cuba, Jamaica, and Haiti in July. What's open? Many hotels and resorts, vacation homes, Airbnbs, HomeAways, public transport, restaurants, cafes, shopping malls, excursions and tours, beaches and parks, which seems like everything is ready to go. So that's the Bahamas, guys. That's choice number 1. Okay, so let's keep it going. Next up, the Dominican Republic, the DR. Check it out. Okay, we're at the Dominican Republic next. So again, I'm on the main page. It's traveloffpath.com and click on the details for Dominican Republic. Dominican Republic reopening to tourists July 1st. Let's see, it's updated as of July 4th. So Dominican Republic will open to tourists starting on July 1st. The Minister of Economy, Planning and Development confirmed on Wednesday. International airports in the Dominican Republic will also restart all operations beginning in June. In an effort to ensure safe and efficient air travel to the country, additional protocols have been implemented at airports. Upon arrival, all passengers will have their temperatures checked as they disembark. If a passenger registers a temperature above 100.6 Fahrenheit degrees or presents any other symptoms, airport authorities will administer a rapid COVID-19 test and initiate the protocols for isolation and treatment of the case. That's interesting. In addition, airport terminals have established guidelines requiring social distancing. So you can imagine what the airports, what it looks like when a plane empties out. There's going to be these little 6-foot stamps, on the ground where you have to stay 6 feet away from each other. So these lines are going to be extremely long. That's if the plane is full, of course. The mandatory use of face masks for all employees and passengers. And as part of the immigration and customs forms provided by the airline or Dominican authorities, passengers will be required to fill out and submit a traveler's health affidavit. Now, this is one thing, always bring an ink pen on a plane. You're always fighting. If you've flown before, when you're going international, you're going to need a plane because you have to fill out everything that you're going to claim before you land. So bring an ink pen. Matter of fact, bring a couple of ink pens, clip it in your shirt so that you don't have to go digging through your luggage and so on to find it. You're going to have to fill out like 2 or 3 forms, it sounds like now. So through this form, passengers declare that they have not felt any COVID-19 related symptoms. So it's basically you're declaring that you're healthy, and you're going to let them know where you're going to be for the next 30 days. Okay, you'll see hotels reopening. Okay, the full reopening for tourism begins in phase 4 starting on July 1st, which is where we are now. Okay, it looks like Delta announced plans to resume several major routes between the US and Caribbean, including the Dominican Republic, back in June. Looks beautiful though. I have not been to the DR. This is one place I have to go. So on phase 4 of the de-escalation process, projected to start on July 1st, tourism will be reactivated, opening hotels, airports, gyms, and restaurants. So when the gym is open, pretty much everything is open. So that's it for the Dominican Republic. So you are welcome to go. Okay, next up, Jamaica. Check it out. Okay, we are back at Jamaica now. I've gone to the main page again, and I'm going to go down just beneath the little story, the little picture, and I'm clicking for the details for what's to be expected. Now, some of these are going to be more detailed than others. So this was updated 3 days ago. Jamaica has officially reopened its borders to all international tourists on June 15th. Even though Jamaica is open for tourism, there are some entry requirements you need to know about before you go. And here's a summary below. Okay, which countries can visit Jamaica? Unlike some countries opening throughout the world, Jamaica is not restricting incoming travelers from any particular countries. So they're letting everybody come in no matter what your origin or nation is. It doesn't even matter where your flight originates. However, depending on where you're traveling to in Jamaica to and from in Jamaica will determine your entry requirements. This is one I found interesting. You'll get there's two basic parts to it. I read this earlier. Beginning on June 15th, all arriving passengers to Jamaica will be required to have a travel authorization prior to check-in for a flight to Jamaica. You do not need one to book a flight, but you will need it prior to check-in for your flight. So you can book ahead of time, but when you get to your airport, or I guess 24 hours before when you check in, you need to have it by then. It is a digital form that you will apply for on their National Tourism Board site, and this is it right here. Visit jamaica.com. Again, the main website that I'm reading from is traveloffpath.com. Love this site so far. Let's see, testing on arrival in Jamaica, updated as of July 4th. So this is just a few days ago, even after my last video. They're updating this. One story was updated 3 hours ago, so keep an eye on this website. When Jamaica first reopened for tourism on June 15th, the Ministry of Health and Wellness made COVID testings at the airport mandatory. A statement on the governor's site once said, all persons entering Jamaica will undergo a test for COVID-19. Testing applies to nationals as well as to visitors. Now, as of a new update, they have removed the terminology and have stated testing may apply to inbound passengers. Remember, we're talking about Jamaica now. They did not say why they removed mandatory testing upon arrival, but it could potentially be because they were running out of tests or perhaps bottlenecking at the airport. Who knows? Now that they've added a new system which only requires higher risk tourists to be tested. Entry requirements for general tourists staying at hotels. A general tourist is a non-resident arriving into Jamaica for the purposes of tourism and staying within the tourism corridor. And that area includes the coastline from the Grill to Port Antonio. And this is the important part with this story, the tourism corridor. You need to stay in that area, or otherwise you're going to have to quarantine, and you'll see what I mean in a second. Upon arrival, the tourism will undergo a health screening. There's A and B. So A, tourists with no symptoms and traveling from low-risk areas will not require a mandatory test at the airport. They will then freely be allowed to travel to their hotel and enjoy their trip. No quarantine. Now B, tourists with symptoms or traveling from a high-risk area or deemed high risk will be tested at the airport. They will have to await the test results under quarantine at a hotel, and it takes up to 48 hours to get that result. But at least you quarantine at your hotel, which chances are is going to be a resort. Entry requirements for general tourists staying with friends and family. So here's the different part. So the first half was fine. Now here we go. If you're staying with family or friends, this is someone who is still a resident and a tourist to Jamaica, but has chosen not to stay at a hotel in the tourism corridor and wishes to stay with friends or family instead. So here's your A and B for that. Upon arrival, the tourist will undergo a health screening. A, tourists with no symptoms and traveling from low-risk areas will not require a mandatory test at the airport. They can then travel directly to the house they will be staying at, but are ordered under strict 14-day quarantine. Did you get that? If you're staying with family and friends, there is a strict 14-day quarantine at your family or friend's home. So hope you're going to be there for a while, more than 2 weeks. And B, tourists with symptoms or traveling from high risk areas or deemed high risk will be tested at the airport, even if they brought a negative PCR test with them. No matter what the test results say, they will still have to quarantine for 14 days. If the test is positive, it will be at a facility. That means you're not even going to stay with your family or friends. You're going to be at a hospital somewhere. If the test is negative, they can go to their house that they're going to stay at. So keep that in mind. This is an update. Now get this. This is the most important one for Jamaica, especially for me. Update for American tourists. For July 10th, 2020, and later arrivals, which is if you're not leaving today, tomorrow, the next day, all travelers from New York, Florida, Arizona, and Texas in the United States will be required to upload a negative COVID-19 polymerase chain reaction or PCR test results. Somebody tell me how to pronounce this. The date of the test must be within 10 days of the arrival date in order to obtain a travel authorization, which I still don't get that 10 days. But here's a summary of the entry requirements. All tourists must fill out the travel authorization card. There's a link to it on this website, traveloffpath.com. Travelers that are low risk would not be tested at the airport and can enjoy their trip within the tourism corridor. Travelers that are deemed high risk will be tested on arrival, and travelers that are ultra high risk from certain U.S. states, we know which ones they are, need to take a PCR test before traveling and be tested again upon arrival. Travelers that want to stay outside of the tourism corridor will have a 14-day quarantine. Keep that in mind. What flights will be going to Jamaica starting in June? And that is as of now too. Toronto to Montego Bay on Air Canada, New York to Montego Bay on JetBlue. United has already resumed daily flights. Other cities to include Charlotte, Atlanta, Orlando, Fort Lauderdale, Boston, Dallas, Miami, and Houston. Then from the UK, British Airlines to Kingston and Montego Bay. What hotels? And this list is long. So pretty much everything is open. All the resorts, all the hotels, all the fun you want, as long as you stay inside the tourism corridor. Okay, so that's it for Jamaica. Stay inside the tourism corridor, and if you're coming from one of the states like I am, just be expected to take that test when you get there. Okay, next up, Puerto Rico. I didn't expect this one, so I'm going to jump right in. I've gone to the same site again, Travel Off Path. We're going to click the link below it for its reopening. This just popped up too. Okay, so July 4th, 2020, last updated 4 days ago, so I didn't see it before. Puerto Rico is officially reopening its borders for tourism on July 15th, so not yet, you have another week. While there are currently no restrictions who can enter Puerto Rico, the tourism board has announced a series of rules and regulations. You know that the best thing about going to Puerto Rico is you do not need a passport. Second good thing, mostly they speak Spanish, of course, but they speak English too. Okay, entry requirements. Travelers must produce a negative COVID-19 test result obtained within 72 hours upon arrival. Now, to me, that makes more sense than the whole 10-day deal, because 10 days but you've gone to the grocery store within 10 days. Visitors who fail to bring a negative test result with them will be subject to on-site testing. Those who test positive will be required to quarantine for 14 days. So yeah, enjoy your trip to Puerto Rico if you are positive. Those who refuse to be tested will also have to undergo 14 days quarantine, which, okay, so get this. So 72 hours, what about the 10-day one? What if you had a 10-day one and you were negative, and then all of a sudden you're positive and you let it? This is why they're telling you this. So they're cracking down better than most, it looks like. They're not just going to let you in with 10 days notice and just on a note saying you didn't have it, because if you do, you come there, you're going to have a 14-day quarantine. I mean, at least you're in Puerto Rico. Now here's the open-ended question: where are you going to be for 14 days quarantine? Do you have to stay at your resort? Let's see if it shows that in a second. And who pays for the test on both sides? Well, I mean, I know you pay it on this side, but who pays it there? And chances are you're gonna have to pay it again before you leave. The drivers will be required to disinfect their vehicles, wear masks, put on gloves while handling luggage, and provide their passengers with hand sanitizer. Ride-sharing passengers will be required to wear masks and are prohibited from sitting in the front seat. Okay, curfew. There's currently a curfew in effect in Puerto Rico from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. through July 22nd. Exceptions are made for emergencies, so hopefully you're staying at a resort here, because you're staying at a hotel like I did when I went, and you're locked down at 10 p.m. at a hotel on vacation. Yeah, so this is one of the easiest and closest to get to, so this is why I pulled these 5 away. So travelers are required to wear face masks when in public and will face fines if they choose not to. They are tighter than in the US. Social distancing is enforced with floor plans and capacities are limited. Beautiful. My first what do you call it, rainforest was in Puerto Rico. Tourist activities and beaches and nature reserves have reopened but are limited to those within the same household. Restaurants, spas, museums, theaters, and casinos are open and operating, but at 75% capacity. All 18-hole golf courses are now reopened. This is actually not that bad. I mean, not that bad. It is bad if you want freedom, but good if you want to stay safe. So most hotels are open, including El San Juan Hotel. Oh, that's where I heard live music. Love that hotel. Caribe Hilton, Wyndham Grand, Rio Mar Beach Resort, and Dorado Beach, and Ritz-Carlton Reserve. If you have to get stuck somewhere, hey, get stuck at this one. Get stuck at the Ritz-Carlton Reserve or at the San Juan Hotel. All guests will have to undergo temperature checks and have their luggage disinfected upon arrival. Wearing masks in public areas as well as restaurants will be enforced. Hotels will be required to regularly clean and sanitize public spaces and limit capacity at the pools to 50%. Fitness centers and spas, which are currently closed, will be reopened and operate at 50% capacity. So they're taking this seriously. They're reopening, but they're taking it seriously. Restaurants are currently open, but at limited capacity. Total capacity was increased from 25 to 50% on June 16, 2020. So there you go. That's Puerto Rico. So there's an option, and it looks like this is probably so far the safest option. Puerto Rico, and close to easy to get to, especially from Miami. Okay, next up, the U.S. Virgin Islands. Check it out. Okay, lastly today, U.S. Virgin Islands. So let's start here first. On June 1st, 2020, the U.S. Virgin Islands, think St. Croix, St. Thomas have reopened for tourism. Americans don't even need a passport to go, just like Puerto Rico. U.S. citizens can fly to the U.S. Virgin Islands directly from Atlanta, Miami, New York, Houston, and Charlotte, and Fort Lauderdale. The best part is tourists don't have mandatory testing on arrival, bringing a negative COVID test or have a quarantine. As long as you have no elevated temperature and no symptoms, you can easily enter. So it seems like the U.S. Virgin Islands is the easiest to get to from the continental United States. And you'll see what I mean. Sounds crazy to mention, but many states in the U.S. are open for tourism. If you don't want to travel outside of the country, you can pick a few places inside. Okay, they're trying to get you to go to a few locations, but I didn't click on the link for this one for the Virgin Islands. Okay, so here's the details for it. Okay, updated as of 2 weeks ago, the U.S. Virgin Islands have officially reopened their borders for tourism on June 1st, allowing both American visitors and international tourists to enter, but you can only fly in from the United States. So if you're coming from Europe, and I don't know who's listening to this video, but if you're outside the U.S., you need to come to the U.S. first before you can get to the U.S. Virgin Islands. And again, if you're a U.S. citizen, you don't need a passport. Okay, this article will show you the flights that have resumed to islands and what hotels are currently open. Okay, what now nationalities can visit? Pretty much any nation can come. So welcome to the U.S. Virgin Islands. Is there any testing or quarantine periods in effect for the U.S. Virgin Islands? Let's see if there's been any updates. When tourists arrive, they are subject to health screenings and temperature checks. If the traveler has no symptoms or high temperatures, they can enter with no mandatory testing and no quarantine period. Random testing may still be applied. Are there any rules for visiting? Yes, here's a few rules. Mask must be worn on the inbound flight, arriving into the airport and leaving the airport. Travelers must agree to health screenings and temperature checks upon landing. So you may get a random one. Mask must be worn in restaurants and public indoor spaces. Travelers should abide by social distancing, hand washing, and sanitizing. What flights? So as of June, you can get there from Atlanta on Delta, from Houston on United, from Miami on American, from Fort Lauderdale on Spirit, from Charlotte on American, and San Juan on Cape Air. In July, Spirit will resume flights from Orlando and Liat. And Liat will resume flights in Antigua, and that's the Antigua and Barbuda. Okay, what's open? Hotels and resorts, other accommodations, indoor and outdoor recreational facilities, movie theaters, bowling alleys, sports gatherings up to 50 people, restaurants for eat-in or takeout, shops, boutiques, and stores, beaches. It looks like everything is pretty much up. Long list of hotels too that you can go to. Okay, so there's different ones for, of course, for St. Croix, St. John, and so on, and they're ready to go. So it looks like this is one of the easiest to get into right now. This is the U.S. Virgin Islands.
We have a YouTube channel, like it.
Please comment and share if you liked the video.
Please subscribe and kick the bell.